Hello and welcome. I'm Anything Sews, and today I'm going to go over a couple of ways to thread your needle and tie knots before you start embroidering. So let's get started. First off, I'm going to go over a few ways to thread your needle. Here I'm using a size 18 chenille needle, which has a sharp point and a large eye and a large shaft. These are very easy to thread because of their large eye, and so they're great for using when you're using all 6 strands of your embroidery floss. So most people, when they go to thread their needle, will try and push the floss through the eye of the needle, and that is significantly more difficult than the way that I like to do it, which is to have my floss just peeking out of the tips of my finger and then bringing the eye of my needle down on top of it so that I'm holding it steady and the floss just slides right through. So that is my number one, how I thread the most of my needles. Very fast, very easy. But I'm going to show you guys now how to thread an embroidery needle. So if you have to thread an embroidery needle, they're much smaller needles. This one is a size 5, which is rather small, has a very small eye, and much finer than our chenille needle was. So obviously I'm going to want to use fewer strands. To separate my strands, I'm going to hold them like I was to thread the chenille needle, just right between my fingertips, and I'm going to kind of separate them out and then pull them one at a time through my finger so that I don't get a huge knotty mess while I'm trying to separate them and they want to twist around each other. So I've just separated 3 strands from 3 strands. I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to use these So using these 3 strands that I separated, I can just thread my needle like I did by bringing it down on top, or you can use the help of a needle threader. A needle threader has a wire-shaped eye that comes out of it, and it's very thin, so it's easier to push through the needle. So I'm going to take that and push the wire bit through the eye of my needle. And because it's firm and very thin, it's easy to push through there, and that provides a much larger eye for me to now thread my floss through, and I'll just pull it back and through my needle, and now it's threaded. So those are a couple of ways to thread your needle. People don't learn them. It's very simple, it's very effective, and now I'm going to show you at least 2 knots. So I have my needle threaded from earlier, and I'm going to go over first a knot that I like to show to my students. I think it's really easy for beginners, and it feels quite a lot like a magic trick when you do it. So what you do is you have your threaded needle. I have a long tail and a short tail, and so I'm going to take the long tail, the long end, and I'm going to lay it across the top of my needle, and then I'm going to hold that down with my thumb. I'm right-handed, so it's in my right hand and under my right thumb. I'm going to take my left hand and I'm going to use this part of the tail and wrap it around the needle about 3 times. So you can see there that it's coiled around my needle, and I'm going to grab all of that between my fingers and I'm going to push my needle through that coil down the length of the rest of the thread. And as I start to run out of thread here, I'm going to pinch that coil very, very tightly and pull my needle all the way through. You should be able to feel it knot underneath your fingertips. And there you go. You have a very strong knot that's not going to come through your fabric because it's a little bit bulky, and you can trim off any excess that you have, and you're ready to go. I'm going to show you now the knot that I use the most often. It's very quick to make, and once you master it, you really don't have to think about what you're doing, which is why I use it so much. So again, I have a short tail and a long tail. I'll always only knot one end of my thread, and that way I can undo stitches and whatnot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that long end and lie it on top of my forefinger, between my thumb and my forefinger, and then, like I did with the needle, I'm going to wrap the thread around my finger a few times. And now I'm going to use my thumb to push and roll the thread down my forefinger. So as I'm pushing it, it's rolling over itself and twisting. And so then I can pull on that big bulk. And now I have this big bulky knot that will absolutely not come out of my fabric. And if I wrapped it about 3 times for show, but if I say wrap it once or twice and roll it down, whoop, that's not too large at all. And so that's where I like to do it. But I don't mind having knots in the back of my fabric. Some people do. So I'm going to show you a technique where you're still going to be knotting your thread, but you will end up having no knots in your fabric once you're done. So this technique is called the waist knot. As you can see, I have my fabric already tight in my embroidery hoop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the thread that I knotted, and I'm going to come down into the fabric from the front and pull it all the way to the knot, and very close to the knot I'm going to make 2 small stitches, just straight stitches, right parallel to each other. I will make 1 more just to be safe. Again, just right next to my other stitches. And then I'm going to come up back through my fabric, and I'm going to cut the big knot off of the front. And now I'm going to pull on this a little bit to show you. I have some anchors in my fabric that aren't going to come loose because they're so small, and because the weave of my fabric is so tight that they're acting as support for that weave, and that weave is acting as support for the stitches. And then I can start embroidering, and there's absolutely no knot in my fabric. It's just stitches, and that's all. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any comments, any questions, leave a comment down below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for watching and happy stitching!